Hello, friends. Welcome back. This is Stephen Kelly, aka Bald Beastie, mechanics guy for 13th Moon Games. We're going to talk today about combat in Coven Crucible. Now, if you have read the core book and/or seen the previous videos, you know that I made some reference to the chart here that you see on your screen. It is the difficulty rating with target number chart. This is going to be extremely helpful once you start getting going, telling stories and/or playing in those stories. What this is going to do is this is a breakdown essentially of what your target number starts at and then how to apply when you apply a difficulty rating. It's pretty cut and dry, pretty easy. Because as we learned either in the last video or in the core book, you would simply apply a negative modifier to your target number. So for instance, if you had a target number of 40 and an easy modifier, there's no penalty at all, no negative modifier, so that's going to be a 40. A moderate is 1/4 minus 1/4 of your target number as a negative modifier. So you see then here, it's a 30. And then of course hard is half, that's a 20. Severe is minus 3/4, so minus 30 for a 10. That's it. That's how you determine what your new target number is. This is also applied to damage, which we'll discuss in a little bit. But just to touch base, let's say you have a ward to protect against damage that is generates a severe level of difficulty. So that means the difficulty rating for the damage applied to damage that you would take is reduced by 3/4. So if somebody hit you for 16 levels of damage, you would then lower this down to 4, and you would only take 4 levels of damage, which is pretty substantial. So keep that in mind. But let's jump right into the mechanics section here. We left off the mechanics basics, basically talking about um, some assisting and rolling a critical success. So today we're going to pick up with range and distance. So this is going to come up more in combat than anything. But magical range. So magical range for casting spells is line of sight, no modifiers. Unless the casting is obvious or uses magic items that require obvious somatic components like a wand or a grimoire or some other magic item, the target is unaware that magic is cast against them. The only time that is not true is if that person, that target, isn't the actual target of the spell, but has a ward that is being suspended. So that would be one of the exceptions. And we'll talk about that in spellcasting. There's going to be another video after this one regarding spellcasting. So physical range, short range 30 feet, no modifier. Medium range is 60 feet minus 2 modifier, and long range is 90 feet minus 5 modifier. So ranged weapons, multiply this distance by 2 for medium-sized weapons and 5 for large weapons. We'll cover those in a little bit. Jumping distance, that is, you can jump a number of feet equal to your body plus agility plus athletics, long, and half of that high. And you half again those totals without a running start. Rounds and scenes, unless otherwise stated, a round is generally 6 seconds of time and a scene is generally an hour. One of the last things we want to talk about before we dive into the anatomy of an action or a combat round, structural integrity. There are things and there are times when you may want to blow up something or punch a hole in something. This is going to give you all of that. And you can see here what the material is or its equivalent, wood, stone, or metal, what their armor rating is, which is what we'll discuss in a minute, how you apply damage to that. This armor rating essentially soaks damage, reduces the damage done to it, and how much health it has, how many levels of health. So punching through a 1 foot thick piece of wood would require 18 levels of damage applied in a single hit, 3 absorbed by the armor, and 15 by the health to destroy it. All right. Okay, combat. Your game is going to have combat. This game, like we said, is designed kind of like an amalgamation of John Wick movies and the last Witch Hunter movie, that kind of setting where Magic and John Wick, and you're going to end up, it's going to be gritty but cinematic as well. All right. So let's talk about what you can do in a combat round. A single combat round, you can do any or all of the following. Move your full speed in feet. You may require, this may require a roll if you're doing something like parkour or something to move through a space that has obstacles, but doesn't require an action. Perform that as part of the movement. Soliloquy, speak, whisper, yell something that can conceivably be said in 6 seconds. Take an action. That's a magical action, martial action, hold action, sprint, or other action. Or you can react to actions that you are aware of, like a magical block, martial block, or a dodge. Okay. Soliloquy is in combat is regulated to whatever a person can conceivably say in 6 seconds or less, once per round. You could also then take another action to speak again or soliloquy again. Magical action, cast a spell or create a magical effect. In combat, this is usually a magical attack, but can be a magical block as well. And we'll talk about that because there are differences between magical actions and magical reactions. The character may perform 2 such actions if your magical skill is higher than 7. 8 or higher in a magical skill, then you're going to get to do 2 actions in place of just 1 when you do a magical action. Martial actions, same thing. It's usually regulated to an attack, but can also be a block or a dodge. The character may perform 2 such actions if their martial skill is higher than 7. The character may perform 3 such actions, or 2 if their martial skill is 7 or less, if they are using the dual wield subskill. So in essence, you're basically getting an extra offhand attack if you're using the dual wield subskill. Hold action. You may have your character hold your action by declaring a trigger to satisfy that it will allow that character to act later in the round. If the trigger is met, then the held action interrupts the triggering action or happens immediately following the trigger action as dictated by the player. So you can say, I'm going to hold a block, a magical block, in case my friend gets attacked. And then all of a sudden, your friend gets attacked later in the round. You can then either interrupt that attack and block it, so that way your friend won't get hurt, or maybe gets hurt much less. Or you could have it happen after the action. Say, if my friend gets attacked, I am going to heal them and cast a healing spell on them. So that's how that works. Held actions not used continue through the subsequent rounds until either the trigger happens or the character changes their action on their initiative. So basically, you just keep holding your action. You don't have to. It's not going to lose your place in initiative. You're not going to miss an action. You can just keep holding on to it. Okay. If the trigger is not met, you may take an action at the end of the round, but you do not have to. Okay. Sprint. That's a thing you can do. In combat, this takes an action to move up to your full speed in feet. So your speed, as we talked about in character creation, is your body plus agility plus the athletic skill times 2. That's how many feet you can move in one round as a movement. If you then take an action to move as well, that's called a sprint. So you get to move again. Move that number in feet again. That number is doubled if your athletic skill is higher than 7. Very much like how martial and magical. If you're higher than 7, you get 2. Same thing here. So if your speed is 20 feet in a round, and your athletic skill is 8 or higher, your sprint would then be 40 feet, which means you could move up to 60 feet in 6 seconds, which is 10 feet a second. Again, other actions, speaking again, texting on a phone, typing on a computer, or any other action defined by the ST. And players, this is where communication is key. Ask if you can do that as another action. All right. Knowledge rolls in combat do not cost an action for recall purposes only. If you're trying to remember something that you've experienced before, cool. Does not take an action. You see something, you're trying to recognize it. What kind of creature is that? Have I seen it before? If you have, if the ST knows you have, you can roll that without using an action. Knowledge rolls in combat do cost an action if it is for purposes of learning something new, like reading a website or book to discover a creature's weakness when that particular creature is currently attacking your circle of witches. All right. Now, let's talk about reactions. Dodge. Dodge is the normal levels of success for the dodge subskill plus trait modifiers. This then translates into a difficulty rating. The attacker would apply a negative modifier to their attack roll. Dodge makes it easier to not get hit. Block makes it easier to not get hurt when you do get hit. You can only do one of these three: dodge, martial block, or magic block. Okay? And so again, we'll look at that chart. So if I have an attack modifier of 40, my target number of 40 to attack you, and you dodge, and if your dodge subskill, or I'm sorry, your dodge LOS, level of success, is say 10, we know that translates into a hard level of difficulty, which means then I look here, my target number then is a 20 to attack you, to hit you, which is still pretty good. If my dodge LOS is 12 or higher, that moves up to severe. Now it's not so easy. So dodge lets you avoid getting hit. Block, martial block or magical block, those help you avoid taking damage. So your martial block is a normal level of success for the subskill normally used to block. And you can use any martial subskill to block, including ranged. You can shoot a bullet out of the air. I know it sounds pretty cinematic, but that's because that's what it's designed to. You can block you can use your ranged, because you're using a pistol, you're fighting with a pistol, you can use your range to block a incoming bullet with your pistol. That's totally fine. Or something to that effect. So your martial block is your levels of success, and that is applied as a difficulty rating to the damage. It applies a negative modifier to the damage inflicted by the attacker. So, for example, someone with melee of 7, specialized training martial, and on our mastery would have a martial block of 9. Okay, so that would translate into a hard level of difficulty, meaning that any damage you would take when you block is halved. So if somebody did 10 levels of damage to you, that would be halved to 5. All right. Magic block is the same way. All right. It is the normal level of success for the warding subskill plus modifiers. So someone with warding 7, specialized training magical, warding mastery, and a familiar would have a magic block of 12. That translates into a severe level of difficulty, which means any damage you would do is subtracted by 3/4. So somebody doing 12 levels of damage to you would actually only do, what, 3? So that's pretty potent there. So that's how combat works. Somebody attacks you, you can say, I'm going to react, and I will block with my ward. I'll magical block with a ward. And that only happens for that attack. That is separate from a ward that protects you from being hurt, like for harm. Now, again, keeping in mind, you cannot have 2 magical modifiers. You can't have a negative modifier to the attack and a negative modifier to the damage if they're both magical. Okay? You can have somebody have a ward on them, which is cool, to help against damage, and then martial block. That is feasible, and that's going to really reduce the damage quite a bit. But you cannot have 2 magical negative modifiers to the same roll. So you can't have a ward and then do a magical block at the same time. Okay? Or you can have a ward as long as it's not against the same thing. So again, you can't have a ward against harm and then magical block, because that's going to have 2 negative modifiers that are magical, and that doesn't work. All right? So the number of reactions you have is equal to the number of actions you can take. So if your magical skill is 7, that means you can have 1 magical action. That also means you can have 1 magical reaction, magical block. If your martial is 8 or more, that means you can have 2 martial actions in this whenever you take a martial action. So you can attack twice. It also means you can now martially block or dodge twice, which is pretty cool. You cannot mix and match. So if you happen to have magical higher than 7 and martial higher than 7, you take an action. You can't say do 1 magical action then 1 martial action. You have to when you take an action, you have to do all or nothing. So it's a magical action or a martial action, or hold, sprint, or other action. Reactions are not restricted that way. You can do a magical block for one attack if you have, and then if you have um, two martial actions, you could do a magical block for one, and then you could do a martial block for another, or you could dodge for another. You don't. That's not restricted, but you don't. They don't stack. You only have a number, the highest level of number of reactions. All right. So that means if you choose, if your martial is 8 or higher, you're going to get 2 reactions. It can be either a magical block or a martial block, or 2 martial blocks, or any combination of those that equal 2. Cool. All right, let's move on quickly because I know we're getting up there in time. 15 minutes already. So let's go on to attack threshold. A character cannot be attacked by more than 4 attackers in a single round and can suffer no more than 8 attacks in a single round, regardless of the number of attackers. So let's say you had 3 guys, 3 goons coming at your character. All 3 of them have dual wield, which means, and they have martial of 8 or higher, which means they're each going to get 3 unarmed attacks, or 3 dual wield attacks. And if the 3 of them attack your character, that could be 9 attacks. However, they can do no more than 8. Part of the reason is because it's just too much happening in one small space. That includes range attacks as well. Sometimes you're going to run out of reactions, like in this situation here, where if you get attacked 8 times, you may only have 2 martial actions, which means you can only block or dodge twice. That's 4 other attacks. What can you do? Well, if your goal is to mainly stay alive, you can designate some of those actions to blocks or dodges, as they were mentioned earlier. So you can, say, I want to block. I want to use my martial action to block 2 more attacks, or dodge 2 more attacks. So that way you can dodge 4 times in a round instead of 2, if that makes sense. All right. And again, any questions you have, post them either in the comments or let us know, and we will answer those as quickly as we can. Initiative. All participants in the round roll their initiative to determine the order in which they act. It is 1d12 plus your character's initiative modifier, which that modifier is will plus agility plus any other modifiers like danger sense. The character with the highest initiative goes first. If there's a tie, the character with the highest initiative stat goes first. The derived stat would go first. If both of them are equal, then you get to, the storyteller will dictate, or you can choose. Familiar, servitors, and initiative. During rounds, a familiar may only roll initiative if their owner wants them to. So if you want if you're a witch and you want your familiar to act separately from you, which you can do, not recommended, but you can do, then they get their own initiative. The reason why is because if it is not going to be acting on its own, they don't roll initiative. But they cannot be targeted either. So that means that you can't have a witch targeting another witch's familiar to reduce that nifty +3 target number +3 LOS buff they get from their familiar for magical actions. You can't target it. You can't target theirs, they can't target yours. As long as that familiar is not acting separately, they don't roll initiative, they cannot be targeted. However, if it does roll initiative, if it is acting separately from their witch, then they obviously they do roll initiative and they can be targeted. All right. Moving on, the round order. So here's how the round order goes. On the character's initiative, the character's player declares or dictates what the character is doing and the character's action. The ST provides a formula for the target number, which we discussed before, along with difficulty rating if applicable, and then and that is generated by the player. The target defender reacts to the action. So if you're going to attack someone, the defender gets to react to that action before the roll. Okay. You have a target number generated, which is why the reaction is important, because you may have a negative modifier or difficulty rating applied. So you don't want to roll before the defender gets to declare their reaction. Okay, they react to that action. If able, the ST provides the applicable difficulty rating or negative modifier to the acting character. So here's the thing: if they are blocking, then the attack will go off as normal. You get to roll for the attack without any modifiers for his reaction for his blocking. But then it's the damage is reduced. But if they're dodging, that's going to affect your attack roll. The character then rolls, applying the appropriate modifiers to either target number or level of success as indicated by the ST for the related reaction. So you would roll if they blocked, then you would roll your attack normally, but then apply the damage or the difficulty rating to the damage. If they dodged, then you would roll your attack with the difficulty rating, but it would not modify the damage. All right. Then the action resolves. Uh, Once you get the hang of this, and once you can have that access to that chart, and you know pre-generated target numbers for actions which are on the character sheet. So there's an action, say, characters know that they're going to mainly do a ranged attack. Even if they're standing right next to somebody, they're going to use pistols. Okay, that's totally cool. Or if they're a dual wielding pistol fighter, they could use dual wield instead of ranged subskill for all of their actions, for all of their attacks. So you know that's what you're going to be doing. So you would probably want to generate your target number ahead of time, right? So you know that because you know what the formula is going to be. It'll be agility plus or agility or body plus martial plus dual wield, and then all the modifiers are added together for all the traits that you have, and then you can write that target number down and the LOS down. That way, when it comes your turn in combat, all you got to do is say, I'm gonna shoot this person. And like, okay, he's gonna block. So you know immediately that that's not going to have any effect on your target number. You're going to roll that target number, and then whatever that character's the reactor's the defender's block is, you'll just reduce the damage by that amount. So like I said, once you get in the hang of it, combat can move very quickly, and as long as everyone is prepared. When things get a little bit sluggish, of course, when you first start, there's going to be a learning curve, but also when you do improvise things that you're not prepared for, or the ST gives you a formula that you don't have prepared ahead of time, then that's going to cause a little bit of slowdown, but not much because you already know uh, all the stats. You can just add them quickly. You already know what traits affect what stats or what skills or what sub skills, so you can add those in quickly. And so it's designed to be quick and cinematic once you get the hang of it. All right, targeted attacks. We're just going to go through these pretty quick here because these are all modifiers now. We're talking about modifiers. Targeted attacks, if you're going to target a certain location, you're going to have a negative modifier equal to whatever's listed here. So I want to shoot somebody in the nose. That's going to be I or object of equivalent size, so it's going to be a -9 modifier. This is in addition to difficulty rating. So if you're trying to shoot somebody in the nose and they're dodging, obviously it's going to be pretty hard to do. Their dodge modifier is applied first for difficulty rating, and then the negative modifier for the location is applied. Okay. Same thing with cover. Characters attempting to target a creature behind cover applies the following modifiers. If they have 1/4 cover, it's -1. 1/2 cover is -3. 3/4 -5. Okay. You can only attack what you see. So if somebody is crouched behind something that's going to give them 3/4 cover, you can, so only their head is visible. You can say, all right, well, instead of doing the cover, I'm just going to target their nose. So you don't add the cover modifier and the targeting modifier because you can see that, and it's not protected by cover. You would just take the location, targeted attack location, all right, modifier. So it wouldn't be a -14, it would just be a -9. The benefit with that is that you also get increased damage, okay? And these, when you target a location, they do more damage, and I'll explain that in a second. Damage. If the attack is successful, damage is based on the level of the subskill plus modifier. So your level of success for whatever subskill you used in the attack, and plus modifiers for like weapon size, targeted location, things like that. That's what the damage is going to be. No matter what, though, no matter any modifications to damage dealt, any successful attack will always do at least 1 point of damage. And no size, location, or armor modifier can be more than 3 to the damage. Also keep in mind that the modifier for armor is subtracted from damage taken after the attack action is resolved. So if someone wearing heavy armor blocks an attack that would do 10 levels of damage, with a block of 13, that attack would still do 2 levels of damage. However, then heavy armor would reduce those 2 levels to 0. That's the importance of armor. All right. How I got these numbers, block of 13 gives a severe level of difficulty, which means you subtract 3/4, right? And you always round down. So 10, 3/4 of 10 is 2.5, rounding down to 2. So it would be 2 levels of damage. Okay. Here's the modifiers. Weapon size. Small weapon gets to add 1, so pistol, small. Medium weapon gets to add 2, shotgun. Large rifle gets to add 3. Target location, arm or leg is +1 to the damage. Head, hand, or foot is +2. Eye or nose, +3. So back up, if when somebody's crouching behind a garbage can and all you can see is their head, you're going to want to go for the nose. Or the head, because that's going to increase. You'll still have the same or a little bit worse modifier, but you're going to do more damage. Okay. Armor for the defender. Light armor is -1, medium is -2, heavy is -3. Those are applied after the action is resolved. Fall damage. This you can read about. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's pretty severe. Something to think about. But in combat, shields are pretty important. Their main function is to block damage. So you're going to use them with the martial block action, right? Then they come in 3 sizes: small, medium, and large, and they function essentially just like weapons in increasing the levels of success, or for you, because you can shield bash, or and how much and levels of success will help you reduce that damage that's coming in when you block with them. Okay, they can be used in attack action using those sub skills. However, they add their modifier level to the wielder's block LOS, right? Like we said, level of success. They also provide cover, and here's the cover rating. Okay, a shield can be made magical, and we'll talk about that later. That's in the crafting guide. Healing damage. Damage heals at 1 health level per day of normal activity, 2 levels resting under a doctor's care or in a hospital. Damage can be healed magically as well. Magical healing does not leave a scar. All right, grabbing and grappling. Getting close to the 30-minute mark here, so I want to wrap this up pretty quick. A grab or a grapple functions essentially like a regular normal unarmed or offhand attack. Okay, you have to have a free hand to do it. If it's successful and at least 1 level of damage remains after blocks, but not counting armor, then you reduce the damage to 0, because you're basically grabbing them. You're not trying to damage them, but you're trying to grapple them. If it works, if it's successful, you would reduce that damage to 0. So it doesn't matter, armor doesn't matter anyway. And the target is grabbed or grappled. Characters in a grapple have their speed halved, but cannot move if the grappler weighs more than the grappled character can carry, and vice versa. So in other words, if you have somebody who weighs 350 pounds, who has grappled someone who successfully who can only lift 200 pounds, then they can't move because they have just basically enveloped them. Otherwise, you can act normally and move take your full allotment of actions and reactions. So you can move half your speed. You can do any of that. All right, unless of course, the person again weighs more than you can carry, then they can't move. But you can still act. You can still use an action to attack. You can still use an action to cast a spell, something like that. And you can still have your reactions. A grabbed or grappled person can, on their turn in initiative, use a martial action to try to break free of the grapple by making a body plus martial plus unarmed dual wield or agility plus athletics plus acrobatics roll with a negative modifier equal to the level of success of the attacker's original roll. Okay? So if I grappled you with an LOS of 14, that means you would subtract 14 from your attempt to break free. Okay? A person who has successfully grappled a creature can use another martial attack to restrain their target. So if I had 2 martial attacks and my first one was to grab you and I do it, I can then use my second one to restrain you. And you would not get a chance to, if your initiative was either before or after mine, you would not get to intercept that or interrupt that action unless you were holding your action expecting to be grappled. It functions just like the initial grab or grapple, and it's successful. The target is restrained, meaning the target cannot physically attack or react or use obvious magical items like a wand or grimoire. You can still cast spells that don't use those things, or if you have those things, you wouldn't be able to use them or get their bonus or benefit from them. But you can still, because magic is a focus of will. Magic is, well, the magic attribute, but it's a focus of mental, not physical. So you don't need to do hand gestures. You don't need to speak. You can do it just by summoning it within yourself. However, everything else, nothing. You cannot physically attack or react or use obvious magical items. The attacker loses all physical actions and physical reactions as well, as long as they restrain the target, but may still move at half speed with the target, provided the target does not weigh more than the character's carry weight. So in other words, this big 350-pound dude grapples you, restrains you, and you know that they can pick you up. They just pick you up and start carrying you. But of course, again, their movement is halved. However, they can't attack or react, and neither can you. And you can try to break free of the restraint the same way as attempting to break free from the grapple, but the negative modifier is doubled. So if they had restrained you with an LOS of, say, 13 or 14, let's say 14, then you would have a negative 28 to try to break free. All right. And then you can go ahead and read through that combat example in the core rulebook. And I know there's going to be questions, and it may seem daunting at first, but trust me, you will get there. Okay. Again, any questions, post them in the comments. I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much, and have a great day.